Well, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you may be watching this. It is time for a recap of what was not the most exciting weekend in the world in the history of Ole Miss baseball. But we're back with you to talk about all things Ole Miss baseball, what we saw, and what we can expect from here, right here on the Rebel Walk. Well, Nick, it was not exactly what we were hoping for, to say the least, to open up the season for Ole Miss baseball. Things started out okay on game one. Well, started out okay in the middle of the night on game
Right.
one. As game one started at good old 10:35 p.m. in Mississippi and lasted until 3:32 or so a.m. 13 innings later, Ole Miss had come out on top in a 5-4 thriller in game one. All was okay. Everybody went to sleep for a couple hours, got back up, got ready for a doubleheader on day number two. And Ole Miss took game one of the doubleheader 5-2. Looked like they were going to be in control of the series. And then it all went downhill from there. Games 3 and game 4 were an absolute nightmare of epic proportions if you're Ole Miss baseball. Everything that could go wrong went wrong, whether it be offensively or defensively or on the pitcher's mound. Nothing went right for Ole Miss in those last two games. As a whole, we're going to get to it as a whole, but Nick, your overall bird's eye view to start with of the weekend, and then we'll delve into more of the nitty gritty.
Yeah, I think like you said, we started off good, took the first two games, and it was like you said, kind of just the last two games where everything that went wrong could have went wrong. So the good thing is it's just opening weekend, so there's a lot of time to iron some things out.
Yeah, and that's where we need to start right there before we get too far into the show. Don't panic. The freak out mode is in full effect. And look, we are all frustrated about what we saw, particularly yesterday. Let's not get it twisted. Everybody's upset about it, myself included, you included. It was frustrating. It was embarrassing. It was everything that you didn't want to see from an Ole Miss baseball team. That said, it's opening weekend. It's a long season. Hawaii is no slouch of a team. All right, let's get that out there right now. Rich Hill has a track record of success everywhere he goes. He is a very good coach. Hawaii is a veteran-laden team that brought back a lot of really good pitchers. This is a Division I baseball team, okay? This is not some little FCS program or something like that Ole Miss should be wiping the floor with, guaranteed every time they play. On top of that, you go to a ridiculously different time zone. Then you try to play 4 games in 3 days after the first game went into 13 innings and wasn't over until, 11 or midnight-ish there, 3:30 a.m. here. And then you have to play 2 the next day with a roster that's completely overhauled and pitchers that are just unproven. So before we go too far into delving into what went wrong, let's just stop and take a look back and objectively realize that Hawaii is not a bad baseball team.
Right.
And it is a team that there's no shame in losing to. Now, should you have beat them? Yes. Should you have probably swept them? Probably. But is it an embarrassing loss? No, it's not embarrassing to lose games to Hawaii in the sense of they are not a slouch of a baseball team. I mean, the last 2 seasons, Rich Hill's got the most conference wins ever for them in back-to-back seasons, 19 and 2 years ago, 18 last year. So he's got that team on the up and up. I mean, they are looking to try to get into a regional this year, and they have the pitching staff to do it. So got that out of the way. Ole Miss they went 2-2 on the weekend. Now, let's dive into what happened over the weekend, Nick. We'll start with the obvious, the offense, okay? It was pathetic, to say the least, for the most part over the weekend. Ole Miss left 36 runners on base over the weekend. That is just absurd to look at how many guys they were on base, to leave that many on. And with runners in scoring position, they were abysmal. They just could not come through with the big hit. It was just the transfer struggled. There really wasn't much positive offensively once you really got past game one for Ole Miss.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It was, I think, and with all the new guys in the lineup, it's part of, figuring out who's going to slide where in the lineup and all that. So for me, I kind of take that out of the weekend, kind of figuring out who's where and who's going to do what. Because, inter squads, you can kind of see who's going to do what. But it's different when the lights come on and it's the real deal. So, offensively, like you said, too many runners left on base. the walks and the strikeouts was nothing crazy, not too many strikeouts, not an insane amount of, on the upper side of walks. Just like you said, getting that big hit when you needed it was after Saturday's game and even all weekend was nowhere to be found.
No, I mean, Ole Miss hit 183 as a team on opening weekend. That is not where you want to be. Suboptimal at best to hit 183 as a team. They struck out 32 times. They only walked 19 times. Striking out 32 times in a weekend is not what you want to see.
Right.
Particularly now, granted, it's going to happen when you play 4 games. So you have to take that into account. But if you look at that and you divide it up, that's what, 8 strikeouts a game, essentially. So if I'm doing math right, which I'm probably not because it was never my strong suit, 32 divided by 4 is 8. So I think I know how to do that much at least. So 8 strikeouts a game, that's not what you want to see if you average that out. And then, of course, the runners left on base was just we already talked about that.
Right.
And the other thing was we didn't see a lot of with all the runners that Ole Miss had on base. We saw 2 stolen base attempts all weekend, and only one of those was successful. I was certainly hoping to see more of that, particularly from Ethan Groff, but we just didn't see a lot of it. I know that's not what Ole Miss does a lot. They're not known as a base stealing club. So you're not necessarily expecting it. But one thing we talked about in the preview show, Nick, and one thing that I wrote about in the article, I know you've wrote about it as well, is what we in game 1, we thought, okay, here's what we talked about. Ethan Groff's kind of leading the way. He was kind of our key, and trying to avoid the small ball mess ups and miscues. And we all the things we talked about happened in game 1. Literally every key to the game we provided happened in game 1. And then it's like from then on, Ole Miss fell apart. And it was just kind of one of those things where they just didn't have it. The transfers offensively in particular, it just wasn't a good one. Trason Hughes was really bad. And, and here's the thing. He came from Mercer. Okay, so we have to keep that in mind.
Right.
Ole Miss didn't necessarily grab him for his bat. It was more for his defense. And you saw his defensive prowess was just insane. But certainly want to see more from Luke Hill and Andrew Fisher for sure.
Yeah, and speaking of, like you said, with Trason Hughes, I think it's going to be a little bit of an adjustment curve for Mercer for sure. But and like you mentioned, Luke Hill, I think Friday night was what helped us out was, that first pitch leadoff double in the gap. That kind of gets him going and led to what probably should have ended up being a 9-inning game Friday night, let's be honest. But ends up going 13. And like you said, just it's going to be an adjustment period from not only – it wasn't an SEC game, but, just playing – in a real game for Mike Bianco, all of them playing together, like I said, when lights come on. So and we mentioned it, it's not time to panic. We've seen where an Ole Miss team can go from struggling to being really good and what happens when they get going good. So like you said, it was a struggle, but I think things are going to get better.
Yeah, I mean, again, opening weekend. So we're not going to the sky's not falling. We're not going down that road yet. Obviously, nobody wants to do all that. 20 new players, 22 new players, whatever it is on the roster. I mean, you're going to have issues. You're going to have issues. They're all coming from different conferences, and then you've also got a freshman starting at catcher in Campbell Smithwick, and he struggled over the weekend. And you don't just walk into the SEC and become a prolific catcher as a freshman. It just doesn't happen. Now, does he have the potential? Yes. That's why Bianco's got him as a starter for Ole Miss. Wasn't a great weekend for him at the plate. Wasn't necessarily a great weekend for him defensively either, behind the plate. So it's just kind of one of those things. Ole Miss, I mean, they committed. Yeah, well, I don't want to get ahead of myself. We'll finish up the offense first. But it just wasn't the weekend you want to see. But all that being said, I want to reemphasize, because obviously if you look on Twitter, it's just woe is us. Ole Miss sucks again. Mike Bianco needs to be fired. The usual things that we always see anytime Ole Miss loses a series or a game. Hawaii's pitching staff is really, really good. Need to emphasize they are really good. This is not a slouch. I saw a few people say these are not SEC pitchers. They are good pitchers. Yeah, they may not be what Tony Vitello has in Tennessee every year, where they're throwing 95 to 97 every time they throw the ball. But their breaking stuff is killer. And we've seen Ole Miss struggle with breaking pitches every year, even the 2022 year. Tim Elko, our favored son, our hero at Ole Miss, could not hit a curveball for a lengthy period of time during that season. So, I mean, Ole Miss struggles with breaking pitches. It's just a fact they've struggled with it the last couple of years. So they got to get that down. And then they just have to be patient. Wait for the fastball, wait for their pitch, make sure it's in the zone. Don't quit chasing bad pitches. All that's going to come with time. It's all going to come with time. So let's not panic too much on that. Yes, it was a bad weekend offensively. We've got a lot of season left and a get-right game coming up with Arkansas State on Wednesday. We'll talk about that towards the end of the show. Now, what we talked about in the previous show, Nick, and what I wrote about, particularly in my article that I thought was going to be the key to this season was Ole Miss's defense. It was not pretty. Everything that I thought was going to happen for Ole Miss defensively, other than Trayson Hughes, it didn't happen. I mean, 6 errors just in yesterday's game alone was not what you want to see. Now, Hughes was marvelous, particularly in the Friday night game when the umpires made just the most egregious missed call I think I've seen in a long time, when he made a very clear catch and then doubled up the runner at first. He never tagged up, and yet it was not ruled a double play. Just ridiculous.
Yeah.
He also made an incredible play in it was either game 2 or 3. I can't remember which one on Saturday it was, that he made the diving catch and doubled up Hawaii. That one actually did count as a double play. So his defense was phenomenal. Other than his defense, things were not great defensively for Ole Miss in the series. Again, same with the offense. It's got to be cleaned up as the season goes along.
Yeah, you're right. And it's hard to, I guess, quantify or qualify the errors that we didn't see. You know, was it a bobble ball, or was it a ball that went under someone's legs? You know, it's harder to see whenever you're just kind of listening to the radio and checking box scores. But like you said, regardless, an error is an error. And I think that was kind of part of what compounded yesterday's game between, you know, bases loaded walks and errors, just kind of shooting yourself in the foot whenever, you know, I think at one point it was 9-1, 5th, 6th inning, you know, and you had a chance to, I'm not going to say make it a game, but not make it look as bad of a game. But and like I'll say it again, and last time I'll say it, but it's beginning of the season, and there's no need to press the panic, but there is definitely some room for improvement.
Yeah, and there's certainly calls for concern, but no need to panic. There were some bright spots, there were some bright flashes, but overall, offensively and defensively, was just not great. And now, of course, the main key we'll get to in a moment is the pitching. But before we get into that, I want to talk about 2 of our great sponsors that are on board with us this year. Thanks again, obviously, Dead Soxy. We talk about them every year. You guys, by now, you're all familiar with Dead Soxy. These are great people, great comfortable socks, great looking socks. Go check them out, deadsoxy.com. Use the code RebelWalk for 25% off all season long, site-wide. Doesn't have to be a promotion, doesn't have to be a win, doesn't have to be a certain amount of runs scored. That code works all season long for every sport for Ole Miss. You can use that anytime. The code RebelWalk for 25% off site-wide at Dead Soxy. Of course, anytime they do run a promotion, we will, of course, fill you in on that. But go check them out at deadsoxy.com. Check out all their socks. Check out their NIL deals as well that they have with Ole Miss athletes. You're not going to want to miss out on those opportunities to support both Dead Soxy and the University of Mississippi and their athletes. So check them out, deadsoxy.com. And then, of course, on the other side there, you'll see Rebel Closet. You can check them out on Instagram at rebelcloset_OX. You can also check them out online at rebel-closet.mailchimpsites.com. I usually just Google it. It's a little easier to find that way. You can Google Rebel Closet Oxford. It'll bring you to the right place. Basically, kind of a similar to you may have heard, like a Plato's Closet or somewhere like that. Yeah. You're gonna go in there. You're gonna maybe drop clothes off to sell, consignment type of atmosphere there. If you're looking to save a little money on your Ole Miss apparel, things like that, go check them out. They will help you out. They'll buy your clothes. They'll sell you clothes, whatever you need. Go check them out, Rebel Closet in Oxford. You might be able to save a little money that way and also get you some good gear at 914 Jackson Avenue East. You can check them out there in Oxford. So thanks to both of those folks for being on board with us this year. We really appreciate it. Now, on to the main part of the weekend. And I say main part, although the offense, you could argue, was the main part. But it all starts on the pitching mound. If you're Ole Miss, if you're really going to win these games, particularly when your offense is struggling. Game 1, of course, we saw not a bad performance at all from Ole Miss on the mound. I mean, they won the game 5-2. There was not a whole lot of bad pitching, so to speak, on the mound for Ole Miss in Game 1 as JT Quinn started that game. He didn't start off too bad. It did get a little hairy as he went on. In the end, he didn't make it very far into the game. He only made it 3.1 innings in. But overall, it looked like he was going to be good for the most part. We did see some bright spots from him, though. His breaking stuff, and particularly his slider, was phenomenal in the innings we did see him pitch. But again, JT a little bit unproven, and it kind of showed as that game got into the middle innings.
Yeah, and it's hard at this point of the season whenever you, like you said, 3 1/3, and part of him coming out there was a pitch count deal. So it's harder to see what a guy is going to do whenever his back's up against the wall, whenever he has a pitch count against him. But like you said, the breaking ball was off-speed stuff was good. But the fastball command, to me, was a problem. At this level, SEC pitching, you got to be able to command that fastball, because if you can't command that fastball, you're going to have teams sitting on off-speed, and that's when you can get in trouble. So, I thought Friday night's pitching was good, but we'll get into the other. But, yeah, JT Quinn, I think we're going to be all right with JT Quinn.
6 strikeouts through 3 1/3. That's pretty good. He only walked 3 in that time, but he gave up 3 runs, and the walks are what started that. That's the killer. And once you start giving up walks and that pitch count starts getting up there, it's going to be a problem if you're Mike Bianco at Ole Miss, and that's kind of what did him in. But and again, like you said, the fastball command just was not there, and that's an issue. I mean, that's got to be you cannot go into SEC play without a fastball. You just simply cannot. You're going to get destroyed every single time you pitch in the SEC. And let's face it, Ole Miss, for whatever reason, and a lot of it's because we don't have a pitching coach, and that's been the subject of a lot of conversation. They don't have pitchers that can throw high velocity compared to what the other SEC programs have. So if you're not going to have the velocity, you've got to have the command. And right now, Quinn doesn't have either with the fastball, but the breaking stuff is there. If he can find that command, then he'll be a really dangerous pitcher for Ole Miss to use on particularly that Friday night. So looking forward to see what he can do. And not gonna read too much into 3 1/3 innings worth of work for him. On the other side, on Saturday, of course, we opened Saturday with a new face to Ole Miss, Gunnar Dennis out of Meridian Community College, coming in as a transfer. He pitched pretty well for Meridian. He went 4 innings. He only struck out 1, though. He walked 3, and the hit by pitches were killer. Again, for Ole Miss on the mound all weekend long, and the walks. And that's what did Dennis in as well. He could not stop giving away free bases. And again, you start giving away free bases when your offense isn't coming through, it's going to kill you and get you out of there quick. And he only went 4 innings. Right.
Yeah, I agree. The free passes was a bit of an issue. Just not so much a free pass in general, but just when they came, like, hey, we can't walk a guy here, and you walk a guy. With 2 outs or whatever it be, runners on base, bases loaded, just as a whole, as a team, the weekend, it was just suboptimal.
Yeah, and the guy that we all were looking forward to seeing, and we're hoping, and we're trying to see what kind of outing we're going to have from him, Grayson Saunier, pitched game 2 on Saturday, and it was very similar to last year. Flashes of greatness, 5 strikeouts, a lot of walks. The command not really there as well. Didn't make it through the 3rd inning. Very similar to JT Quinn. He only went 3.2, so he made it an extra 1/3 of an inning, but he gave up 4 hits, 5 runs. 4 of those were earned. He walked 3 as well in just 15 batters faced. So, again, Grayson, first outing of the year. I love Grayson. He's got a lot of potential, but very similar to JT Quinn. The command just isn't always there.
Yeah, and like you said, first outing of the year, young guy, it's tough, and like you said earlier in the show, you go out to Hawaii, time difference, you're out at the ball field all day. You play two 7-inning games, not as bad as 9, but still just a long day, and just it's and also, you got some pitchers and catchers that haven't really thrown to each other, where we have seen in years past, a Hayden Dunhurst or whoever it may be starting for 3 years and being with these pitchers for a while. So it's gonna at times be bad just from that aspect, but I have hope for the pitching staff.
Yeah, and then again, Riley Maddox, of course, the starter yesterday, coming off injury, his first game back from injury, only made it 2 innings, did not do very well, gave up a lot of runs, and of course, yesterday was just a disaster all around for Ole Miss. But not necessarily as surprised about that one. You kind of expected a short outing for him. Obviously, we're hoping for more than 2 innings. with a 13.5 ERA in those 2 innings. But you can't necessarily be too upset about Riley's performance yesterday, based on the fact that he's coming back from an injury. It's his first game. He only pitched 3 innings last year, and he's coming off of a surgery and an injury and all those things. So Riley, I've got a little bit more grace for on his first outing. But again, that's got to improve.
Yeah, I agree. And I think another thing is, he's past 2 years, he's been a reliever. So it's totally different ball game when you're starting a game. And like you said, a little bit more of a, great grace for him, having come off Tommy John, starting his first game in his collegiate career on the road. So there are some things there working against him that you didn't want to chalk it up as a loss, but it was. I want to say you expected less of it, so you would have liked to see more than 2 innings, but at that point, it was just almost putting a Band-Aid on things and let's get another guy out there and see what someone else can do. I think I saw it was 17 pitchers this weekend we threw. You'll never see that many pitchers throw again in a weekend for Ole Miss.
Yeah.
You won't. So, and that goes with, playing 4 games. But I think more or less for the pitching staff, they didn't do well. But part of it was, let's see what some guys can do. Some guys we've never seen throw, new faces. So it was good to see that, but it was bad to see, kind of how it went.
Yeah, now we're going to talk about the one positive from pitching staff in just a minute. I definitely am not going to get through the show without talking about him because he was incredible. But before we do that, we'll talk about our other 2 wonderful sponsors that are on board with us this year as well. We'll start with Brown Insurance Agency, local insurance company there in Oxford, right on North Lamar Boulevard, 1328 North Lamar. Brown Insurance Agency, they're going to take care of your business insurance, home insurance, auto, life, health, whatever you need. Give them a call at 662-234-2941 or go see them at 1328 North Lamar Boulevard right there in Oxford. Another local company on board with us this year, and we're grateful for Hugh Brown and his staff over there at Brown Insurance Agency. Local, been around for a long time there in Oxford. You're going to want to check them out if you have any insurance needs, whether it be commercial for your business or just for yourself, whatever you need. Be sure and check them out. browninsurance.biz. You can check out their website and learn a lot more about them. And then Phoenix Embroidery Company is on board with us this year as well. John Eakes, the owner there, he's going to take a lot of pride in what he does and how he handles your brand and your logo. It's very cliche to say that you strive for perfection, but that's exactly what he does. And you're going to want to check him out. And when you talk to him, when you go get work done through John, you'll find out why he is so well known and so well respected in that industry with embroidery, screen printing, et cetera. Go check him out, Phoenix Embroidery Company. You can find him online if you need to know more at phoenixembroideryco.com and check him out, check out his work, find out his contact information. He can get back with you. They're on Jackson Avenue West as well, 2580 Jackson Avenue West. Give him a call, 662-473-8085. We're grateful to have Phoenix Embroidery on board with us as well this year. Thanks to both him and Brown Insurance for jumping on with us. Now, we're not going to get through the pitching staff and move on without talking about the one real bright spot of the weekend for Ole Miss, and that was Mason Nichols. Now, we only really saw him in game 1, but my goodness, did he put up a performance that Ole Miss needed in a big way. He came in and pitched 4 1/3 innings in game 1, gave up no hits, no runs, struck out 5, he walked 3. But he did not do any damage with those walks. He actually came into the game with the bases loaded and escaped that jam and then went right out of there and pitched 4 straight innings after that to keep Ole Miss in position to win that game, which they eventually did. Mason is one that struggled last year, particularly in situations with the bases loaded. That was not where you wanted to see Mason Nichols last year. He came in this game on Friday night with some cojones and got Ole Miss out of a major jam and then pitched his lights out with those 4 straight innings. Mason Nichols, you got to give him – I think he was probably in the running. I'm not going to spoil anything. He'd probably be in your running for player of the week.
Yeah, just like you said, it was last year he struggled a little bit. There's no doubt about it. And it was good to see him back in, 2022 form, in that College World Series run that we made. And like you said, he was in the running for my player of the weekend, which we'll get to. But I think without his performance Friday night, we might be sitting here talking about a 1-3 series loss. So props to him for coming in and getting out of a jam and not only getting out of that jam, but going, I think what you said, 4 innings. I'll be honest, I ended up falling asleep after he came in. But yeah,
I don't think you were the only one.
Yeah, dominant performance from Mason for sure.
That was a game that a lot of folks didn't make it all the way through, and for no shame in that. That was quite the. It really kind of sucked that was the only game that was on TV or streaming. Now, for Ole Miss fans, probably glad that was the only one that was on streaming, quite frankly, with the way the rest of the series went. But shout out Eli Savoy on the Ole Miss Network as well as Hindu. They did a great job filling in for DK, who was doing basketball. Eli, of course, right here up in the Memphis area. It's 456. I used to work with Eli. Does a great job filling in for DK. Got himself a free little trip to Hawaii out of the deal. So shout out to you, Eli. You lucky dog, getting to go down to Hawaii with Ole Miss. But he did a great job on the Ole Miss Network, letting us keep up with him on the radio or the app, however you were listening. So glad to have that at least, where we could at least hear the game, although it didn't go so well in games 3 and 4. It was still nice to be able to keep up with it. But yes, Mason was phenomenal. And you mentioned the amount of pitchers Ole Miss used over the weekend. They needed that 4 innings out of him, because had he not been able to go that 4 innings, you would have been talking maybe another pitcher or two potentially being used, and you might be up to 19 to your entire staff essentially, and you've still got 3 games to play after Friday night. So Mason Nichols, in my opinion, was one of the key aspects to the weekend as far as keeping Ole Miss in contention to at least split the series. As you said, had he not done that, you might be talking about a 1-3 weekend, and boy, that would have been even more disastrous. Definitely not what you want to see. But on that note, we'll go ahead and get to it. It's time for Nick to reveal who he decided to put on his board at number 1 for the player of the weekend. Well, Nick, it wasn't a whole lot to take away from the weekend, but there had to be somebody. Who you got?
I got Ethan Leger. He had a great weekend. He only started 3 games, but it was good to see him. At the end of last season, he struggled beginning last season, but kind of come into his own at the end of last season, and saw him kind of pick up where he left off with that veteran presence in that lineup. He played the 2 seasons at Meridian, and for those who don't know, I'm sure many are aware, junior college baseball in Mississippi is no joke. So it's not like he came from nowhere. And he had 6 hits on the weekend, 6 for 11 with 4 runs, 3 RBIs, and 2 doubles. And I think another thing that is going to end up paying dividends for the team with him this year is his ability to play outfield and infield. You can put him at second, you can put him at third, you can put him in left or right, and I don't doubt he can play center. Friday night he ran down that ball in the gap, and I saw that and I was like, okay, Leger can play out there. So throughout the season, I think it's going to be huge that we can put him in the infield and the outfield.
Yeah, I mean, 545 with a 1.298 OPS over the weekend, and got on base for the 571. I mean, the only guy that did better than that was Bo Gatlin, but Bo Gatlin also only had 5 at bats, and he was one of the few home runs in the series as well with the 3 hits. But Leger overall, I agree with your selection there. I mean, he is clearly the reason that we won game 1, and was part of the reason that we stuck around and were able to pull out game 2 as well. And just unfortunately, he was one of the only ones doing anything offensively for the Rebels, it just didn't last very long. And then of course he didn't start all 4 games, but Leger is certainly a bright spot, one of the few bright spots offensively for Ole Miss from the weekend. I mean, Ethan Groff, I mean, it wasn't a great weekend for him, but he's still, at least you have a bright spot from him. He's still got the skill set. So, if we're going to talk about, obviously nothing like Leger did, but at least he's there. He was at least being patient at the plate like he does.
Right.
And then of course, Bo Gatlin showing some spark as well. Yeah. Certainly disappointed with, what we saw from the rest of the offense this weekend. But again, I was hoping to see a little bit more of Furness, or of Will Furness. Didn't see a lot of him this weekend. I'm sure Mike has his reasons for that, and we'll see how things go as we get through or start getting further into the season. Up next for Ole Miss, of course, they will have Arkansas State in the home opener at Swayze Field this weekend. Not sure who Mike's going to have tapped to start that game just yet. I don't believe he has announced that. I'm sure it will be one of the bullpen arms. That's typically what happens on Wednesday night. Arkansas State, of course, a team that Ole Miss is very familiar with. It's typically kind of a midweek game that Ole Miss plays every year.
Yeah.
It's not somebody that they are unfamiliar with. In that sense, they're kind of a regional team, and Ole Miss might decide to start a certain transfer that they got over this year with Kyler Carmack. He transferred from Arkansas State.
Yeah.
Did not see any of him at all this weekend. So it will be interesting to see what Mike decides to do. Arkansas State, of course, they had their opening weekend. They went 3-0 this weekend against Omaha. Ole Miss not played Omaha. We're familiar with Omaha, but don't know anything about them, I'll be honest with you, as far as the college is concerned. But Arkansas State won their 3 games over Omaha, 14-4, 7-5, and 12-0. So no shortage of offense from the Red Wolves in their weekend. So again, no slouch of a team. You can't overlook anybody if you're Ole Miss right now, particularly with the roster that they have. So we'll see. That game, of course, for Ole Miss will be Wednesday at 4:00 p.m. Of course, you can listen to that game on Ole Miss Radio, and you'll be able to stream it, I believe, on ESPN Plus. I'm going to double check that for you right quick. It may not be okay. Nope, I'm wrong on that one, so I apologize. That game is going to be on the SEC Network Plus, not ESPN Plus. I knew it was one of the pluses. I just had the wrong plus.
Yeah.
But SEC Network Plus at 4:00 p.m. on Wednesday for those of you interested in checking that one out. And, of course, it's now time, what we do on every show after a series. It's time to go around the SEC. Well, around the SEC, everybody else did pretty well this weekend. The SEC had a very successful weekend in baseball. Now, Ole Miss was not the only team to lose a game to a team they shouldn't have lost to. So let's calm down, hit the brakes a little bit like we've talked about. Our good friends from down the road a little bit in Starkville actually lost one of their games at home to Air Force. They did win the series 2-1, but the Air Force was able to pick up a big win. Vanderbilt had to fight in game 1 on Friday. They had to come from behind to beat FAU, and they ended up losing game 2 to FAU. I believe they did 5-4. I'll double check on the Sunday score as well. And then Florida was upset. Number 2 in the country was upset at home by St. John's on Friday as well. They lost that game by a final score of 9-5. And then their next 2 games were canceled due to weather. So Florida is just 0-1 after opening weekend, did not play their last 2 games. So St. John's only got 1 victory out of that. But everybody else on Friday, Vanderbilt, Kentucky, LSU, Georgia, Arkansas, South Carolina, Missouri State, Bama, Texas A&M, Auburn, Tennessee, Missouri, and Ole Miss, all winners. So everybody but Florida a winner on Friday. And then on Saturday, of course, we saw Ole Miss win game 1. Florida and St. John's again did not play. South Carolina won again. Everybody else won on Saturday. Ole Miss took game 1. Mississippi State lost to Air Force on Saturday, and Tennessee lost to Oklahoma on Saturday as well in that classic that they were playing in. And then yesterday, Missouri and Cal Poly were also canceled to go along with Florida and St. John's. But again, everyone else in the SEC other than Ole Miss and Arkansas were winners. Arkansas was upset by James Madison yesterday by a final score of 7-3. And they are playing another game today. I'm not exactly sure why. I don't know if something happened with one of their weekend games. I didn't see if they did not play on Friday or Saturday, but Arkansas leads that one 4-0 in the bottom of the 7th right now. And then LSU will play Central Arkansas today at 3:00 Eastern, 2:00 Central. And Missouri Cal Poly once again was canceled. So some inclement weather happening around the country. But LSU and Central Arkansas, LSU, of course, 3-0 after that weekend. I don't see them having any trouble taking on Central Arkansas at Alex Box Stadium. So a very successful weekend for SEC baseball, and we are seeing, once again, some very strong teams across the league.
Yeah, and like you said, a lot of these teams that you mentioned, other SEC teams playing, it's teams that you hear of, in tournament or, on the bubble of being in the tournament. So opening weekend, some good opponents, some of these other teams are playing, some not so much. But, yeah, and for me, more than anything, I'm just excited college baseball is back. I know you love it just as much as I do, keeping up with other teams around the conference. And, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention one of our favorite, TJ McCants, big weekend down there for Alabama. And another big weekend for Peyton Chatagnier, Friday night, that walk-off drop third strike that he ended up winning that game for TCU. So good to see some of our old Rebels that we, were on that College World Series team and we're forever indebted to, having good weekends. Wish we still had them, but, it is what it is.
Peyton also hit 2 bombs on Saturday in their second game. So Peyton having a great weekend. Yeah, certainly missing those guys. I will tolerate no Peyton Chatagnier slander, by the way, for all you people that are slandering him on my timeline on Twitter or X or whatever the heck you want to call it. I'm a big Peyton fan. I certainly miss him in Oxford, but wish him all the best. TCU had some interesting uniforms yesterday. It looked like they basically stole the Twins logo.
Yeah,
I'm not sure exactly what that's about, but hey, otherwise some pretty clean looking uniforms. Ole Miss allegedly has a cream uniform coming this year with just a blue Rebels across the front. I think it would look a little better in red myself, but the picture I saw, I'm not going to say who it was from, but somebody who at least has some connections within Ole Miss and is part of the media beat was talking about it recently. I have not seen those yet, of course, other than that, but allegedly it is true, so we'll see. If that happens as the season goes on. So Ole Miss potentially adding another uniform to their uniform arsenal, the best group of uniforms in college baseball, of course. And you will not convince me otherwise.
A lot of people are trying to take that powder blue from us.
Everybody wants the powder blue.
Yeah.
Who was the latest to do it? Was it Arizona, right?
Arizona, I think. Shoot, I'm not going to make myself look.
I know Liberty did it last year.
There are a few others.
Arizona did it this year. I know Gonzaga, I believe, has a powder blue uniform now.
Yeah.
Actually. Everybody wants to be that powder blue, but nobody will ever touch Ole Miss on the powder blue spectrum as far as how good it looks. I mean, Ole Miss, everybody wants to be the best. The pinstripes and the powder blues are just the 2 best looking uniforms in college baseball. Arkansas's creams are very good looking. They're good looking uniforms across the board. But you won't top Ole Miss baseball uniforms.
Yeah.
Next weekend, there will be some big games, and I'll be keeping an eye on going around the SEC. I'll be particularly keeping my eye on Auburn on Friday. They will be taking on Iowa, and Ole Miss will be playing Iowa here before too long, here in a couple of weeks. Of course, Ole Miss has High Point all weekend. Not everybody is playing a 3-game series next weekend against the same team. There will be some mix and match games and maybe some tournaments or some different teams playing. So, of course, not everybody playing the same team all 3 days. Ole Miss is. They will be playing High Point in Oxford. We'll, of course, do a preview show for that a little bit later during the week. But we'll get to that. But Ole Miss. But I'll be keeping my eye on that one, Auburn and Iowa, kind of see how that goes. Iowa currently ranked number 18 after they had a good weekend. And they've got a really good player that I'll talk about a little bit closer to that as well that you're going to have to keep an eye on. And then Arkansas will be taking on Oregon State on Friday. Now, that might bring back some bad memories for Arkansas fans, particularly if there's any pop flies in foul territory to be worried about. But Arkansas, number 2 in the country now in the latest rankings. Oregon State, number 7. So a big, big game on Friday coming up for those 2 games. And let me just check here. I'm not sure if that's a 3-game series or if that is just a Friday game. But I'll verify that right quick. On Saturday, no, it is not a 3-game series. It's going to be the Kubota College Baseball Series in Arlington. So Arkansas will be playing Oklahoma State on Saturday. So again, that's going to be one of those that's not a 3-game series, but some big games down there in Arlington as well coming up next weekend to be keeping an eye on. So it's going to be another good weekend of college baseball coming up next weekend. Of course, Ole Miss will be SEC Network Plus for all 3 of their games over the weekend as well with High Point universities. So you'll be able to watch all those as well. We'll be keeping you up to date with all that. In the meantime, Nick, Ole Miss hopefully will bounce back on Wednesday. We will keep you guys updated on what, of course, at the rebelwalk.com with who Ole Miss will be pitching in that game once Mike announces and who we find out from Arkansas State as well. But again, a much needed bounce back win coming for Ole Miss. Going to absolutely have to have that one to kind of get back on track before you open up the weekend at Swayze Field with High Point. Because then things get a lot tougher from there once you play that one. So it's not going to get any easier. Nick, great to have you back on board, man. You're back doing the shows. And Ole Miss finishes the weekend 2-2 with 2 wins, 2 losses at Hawaii. Hopefully they are at least back on their way. They were probably back stateside by now. I would imagine they probably came on back based on how travel normally goes once they leave. But that's a tough swing time zone wise.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll have a short turnaround before they play again here in just a couple of days on Wednesday afternoon. In the meantime, we'll talk to you guys after that game. We'll do a preview for the weekend, probably sometime after the Arkansas State game, most likely on Thursday. Me and Nick will confirm that, but we'll probably do a preview show for you then. In the meantime, hotty toddy, everybody. Don't hit that panic button. Ole Miss has a lot of baseball season left, and we'll be keeping you up to date with it right here on the Rebel Walk all season long. Have a great afternoon, everybody.